Hey guys, I was reorganizing my bookshelves and I found this book. It's called The Ink Drinker, and I thought maybe I could read it to you. Chapter 1, The Hiding Place. My father owns a bookstore. He loves books. He devours them like an ogre. All day and long into the night he reads. It's an obsession. There's no cure, but our family doctor doesn't seem to worry. Every evening I find a new pile of books at our home. They're everywhere, even in the bathrooms. But it's useless to complain. With Dad, books are always welcome. He speaks to them as though they were people. He gives them their first names and calls them my little bookies. Every book is his special friend. As for me, I have no special friend. And books definitely don't qualify. I hate them. You see, I may look like my dad, but deep inside we're very different people. Mom pretends not to notice because she loves us both. Can you believe she won't even come to my rescue when my dad makes me read them? Summer vacation has just started, and to keep busy, I'm helping out in the bookstore. I'm not allowed to do much, though. Dad won't let me tidy up or even touch anything. He says paper doesn't last long in my hands. I guess I do like the sound of paper being torn. It's like music to my ears. I end up spending most of my time observing the customers. I know all the regulars and all of their little habits. Some sniff the books as though they were selecting a bouquet of roses. Some choose any old book because they love a surprise. And still others can't make up their minds. They pick up a book, put it back down, pick it up again, and finally leave it. More often than not, those who walk away empty-handed look all embarrassed because they hadn't bought anything. I have a hiding spot in the back of the store. A tiny window carved into a wall of books. No one can see me. I am a spy. I write down the tiniest details of my observations in a notebook. Who knows? It might be the starting point to my very own book. But I doubt that, because grammar isn't my strong point. Today, there was a new customer whom I had never seen before. He must have just moved to the neighborhood. He was one weird-looking guy with a gray complexion and bristly eyebrows. His behavior was even weirder. I could hardly believe my eyes. It looked as though he was floating off the ground like a ghost. Chapter 2, A Strange Customer. With my very own eyes, I saw the unknown reader drinking a book. I'm not kidding. And I swear I wasn't hallucinating. For 5 minutes, I saw the reader walking silently between the shelves, with his eyes closed and his arms stretched out, as if he were listening to the books. All of a sudden, he seized one. Then, things got even crazier. He didn't open the book. He simply separated the middle pages and created a slit. And through this slit, he inserted a straw, which he had in his jacket pocket. And he started sucking on it. A look of absolute pleasure spread over his face, as if the book contained an ice cream sundae. To be sure, it was a super hot day. Definitely not weather for book shopping. I gasped in surprise. That was a mistake. The strange customer obviously heard me because he quickly reshelved the book, put the straw back in his pocket, and headed straight for the door. As soon as he was gone, I jumped out of my hiding spot and went to examine the book in which he had inserted the straw. It was easy enough to find, because the book was thin and rubber-like. As I pulled it off the shelf, I was struck by its incredible lightness. If there had been a gust of wind, it would have just blown away. But that wasn't all. When I opened the book, I almost fainted. It was blank. There wasn't a single word left on the pages. The weird reader had drunk the ink off the book down to its very last letter. Chapter 3, The Chase. I was so excited that I didn't have time to be afraid. I had to take action, and fast. I was convinced the strange customer would never come back to the store, since he had heard me gasp and knew that someone had caught him drinking ink. I had two choices. Either I could tell my dad everything I just seen, or I could figure this thing out by myself, like a real detective. I knew my father wouldn't have believed me anyway. He might have even accused me of erasing the letters one by one. After all, he knows I'm allergic to reading. So I decided to follow the tracks of the odd reader. "Where are you off to?" Dad asked as I dashed towards the door. "Just out," I called back. In the street, the glare and heat of the sun hit me full blast. I was afraid I had taken too much time making up my mind. The ink drinker had vanished. I started to run, weaving in and out amongst pedestrians and racing up the block. Nothing. But giving up wasn't an option. This was clearly a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I persisted in my chase and finally caught sight of my customer. Instantly, I recognized his peculiar looks and his unmistakable walk. He was moving quickly, but his legs were motionless. Everyone in the street steered clear of him. I stopped behind a tree to catch my breath, and then followed in his tracks. And that's how I ended up in front of a cemetery. Chapter 4, The Cemetery. I couldn't help shivering. A cemetery isn't exactly my favorite place to visit, and I knew that if I kept following him, I might end up in terrible danger. But I couldn't stop now. I'm a tough kid, not a coward. I tried to keep up with him as he ran down a path, then cut across the middle of the cemetery. Then, suddenly, he veered off onto a little diagonal walkway. By the time I had arrived at the intersection, he had disappeared. And that's when it hit me. A 7-letter word came out of my lips. Vampire! What a fool I was not to have realized this instantly. Not wanting to have gone through all this trouble in vain, I started to search among the tombstones. Dates and names were engraved on them. Although the people buried underground were unknown to me, I felt uneasy and a little impolite as well to be walking on their resting places. Yet one of the dead had drunk a book. Where was my vampire hiding? Coming face to face with a vampire is pretty unusual. On top of that, I had been lucky enough to find a rare ink-sucking one. Lucky and scared to death. Suddenly, I saw it. A strange vaulted monument in the village path. It resembled the shape of an ink bottle. My knees began to tremble. It was still daylight outside, but it might as well have been pitch black. Moving like a robot, I pushed the gate of the bizarre vaulted grave. It wasn't locked. A flight of stairs went down deep into the ground. Slowly, I descended the steps as cobwebs fell from the ceiling and landed in my hair. Downstairs, I saw a little round room whose walls were covered with thousands of books, all tightly packed like soldiers at attention. The strange library was the monster's pantry. A few candles lit a fountain pen-shaped casket that was lying on a platform, and inside, well, my customer was snoring. His body was hidden by a blanket. Only his head, which was resting on a large satin pillow, lay exposed. I noticed that small freckle-like letters seemed to be engraved on his papier-mâché skin. I got closer so I could examine him in better detail. And suddenly, he sat up and fixed his eyes on me. They were as dark as ink. My blood began to churn. I felt as jumbly as a soft-boiled egg. And I wondered if vampires like soft-boiled eggs. Chapter 5. Vampire. I was so frightened I couldn't move. My vocal cords even froze. I was unable to scream. What are you doing here, kid? The vampire had a soft, hissing voice. I needed a clever reply, and fast. I wanted to visit my grandmother's grave. Guess I'm in the wrong place. Your grandmother is buried in the cemetery? Well, no, I must have come to the wrong cemetery, too. He started growling. I was completely startled, especially by the sharp and threatening tongue that moved between his lips. It had the texture of an ink blotter. You followed me from the bookstore, kid. Why? There was no point in lying anymore. I was sure that he could read my thoughts. You drank a book with a straw, I answered. I saw you! Now I understand. You're a foolish kid. Do you know who I am? Vampire? Indeed. You're lucky that after 5 centuries of fine dining on blood, I'd become allergic to this stuff. Otherwise, I dare not think about what he meant. Why do you drink blood, sir? I asked. I suffer from liver problems for the past 72 years. Ink is the only food I can digest without difficulty. And I believe it or not, it is quite nutritious. Really? But then, why not just buy bottles full of ink? You could keep them in a refrigerator stocked right here in this crypt. It would be a lot easier. Not possible, kid. Bottled ink is as bland as salt-free food. But ink that is aged on paper, well, it's a gourmet dish. Simply sublime. I frowned. You don't believe me? Oh no, I do. I started to back away. No, you don't believe me. Never mind. Like it or not, you too will develop a taste for ink. Tomorrow, you will understand. He sprang like a devil out of his casket and smiled. His dazzling teeth looked razor sharp like pen nibs, and he was coming closer and closer. I felt a dark veil descending upon me. Chapter 6. Yum. Delicious. Vampires don't exist. No one drinks a glass of blood for breakfast, and people sure don't suck ink with a straw. I hate these freaky nightmares. They make me jittery. I had fallen asleep in my hiding spot. The bookstore was about to close. A strange itch on my arm woke me up, and as I tried to get rid of it, I realized that was coming from deep under my skin. To make sure I had been dreaming, I browsed through a few books. Everything was in order. All the books were jam-packed with words. I returned to my hiding spot and felt overwhelmed by an indescribable mix of drowsiness and heaviness. I heard my dad double lock the store door, alone at last. The surrounding silence and darkness were exhilarating. Dad hadn't realized that I was still inside, and I'm sure once he did, he would come search for me. But I had better things to do than go home and go to bed. The books, all neatly lined up on their shelves, were calling to me. Come, come, open us. It was the very first time that I had craved the book. Come, come, browse through us. I just happened to have a straw in my pocket. Lucky me. The first mouthful was electrifying. However strange it may seem, I was eating sentences and crunching paragraphs. The books tasted like brownies. Yum. Delicious. But even more astounding, the sensations on my tongue varied from word to word, from paragraph to paragraph. I wasn't simply absorbing ink. I was absorbing pure and total adventure. On a wild sea, two ships waged a ruthless battle. Crash! With swords between their teeth, the pirates smiled ferociously. I was not reading. I was experiencing all the action firsthand. I was the captain of a king's ship, and I was fighting for my life. Suddenly, I found myself facing a devil with an eye patch and a wooden leg. It was the notorious Captain Flint. He lunged at me with his sword. I was exhausted. My arms felt like jelly. In a last-ditch effort, I run toward my enemy. He dodged my attack, and I went overboard. As I sucked the first words of the second paragraph, the lights were suddenly turned on. Dad was there. I swallowed wrong, and the words got stuck. "Time for bed, you little rascal," he said. He didn't understand what I was doing with the book. "You're supposed to read some books, not chew them." When he noticed the straw and the ink dripping down my chin, his anger subsided. "Did a dog bite you?" "Not exactly." He must have feared I had rabies. I reassured him, claiming the ink was just chocolate, and he believed me. Still, he wasn't totally wrong. I had indeed been bitten, but not by a dog. When I had passed out in the crypt, the vampire had used his nib-like teeth to carve his name into my arm. Dracula. I was now one of his kind. I had become an ink drinker. And for the first time in my life, I relished being the son of a bookstore owner. The end. Hey, boys and girls. I hope you enjoyed that book as much as I enjoyed reading it to you. I miss you, but I'm glad to know that you're home, safe and healthy. Hey, before I go, want to see something funny? You see that picture up there? Wait, I'll get closer. That's me with hair.